The white walls of the medical center reflected the pale light from 3 suns outside. Commander Zexthai sat in the soft chair, 4 arms folded across a broad chest. The Vorthak had always been proud warriors, standing tall on their powerful legs, but now, 2 of those arms were metal replacements, and the commander's once bright blue skin had faded to a dull gray. Dr. Milandra made notes on her data pad. The Kelian doctor had treated many soldiers after the war ended 6 months ago. Most came back with missing limbs or scars. Some had nightmares. This was normal after any conflict. But the cases involving humans were different. Very different. "Tell me about your last deployment, Commander," she said in her soft voice. Her large, dark eyes showed kindness. The Kelians had evolved from prey animals, like most species in the Galactic Coalition. They understood fear. They understood when to run. Zek's thigh shifted in the chair. The metal arm made small clicking sounds as the fingers moved. It was supposed to be a simple mission. Hold the supply depot on Kepler 442b. Standard defensive operation. How many troops did you command? 50,000. All experienced soldiers. We had the best weapons, the best training. The commander's voice was steady, professional. This was just another report. Dr. Milandra nodded. And the enemy force? 3,000 humans. The doctor's writing stopped. Her head tilted slightly. I see. Please continue. Standard coalition doctrine says any reasonable enemy would retreat when facing odds of 15 to 1. They had no air support. No heavy weapons. They should have run. Zextai's voice stayed calm. But something changed in those yellow eyes. But they didn't retreat? No. The word came out like a growl. They attacked. Dr. Milandra had read the official reports. The Battle of Kepler 442b had lasted 3 weeks. The coalition forces had eventually withdrawn, leaving the depot to the humans. The files called it a tactical redeployment. But 50,000 troops don't redeploy from 3,000 unless something went very wrong. What made you withdraw? She asked gently. The commander's hands started to shake. The metal fingers clicked against each other in a rapid rhythm. They don't fight like other species, Doctor. When a Vorthak gets hurt, we pull back to heal. When a Kelian faces death, they run. It's smart. It's how life works. And humans? They don't stop. Zek's thigh stood up suddenly, pacing to the window. I watched a human soldier take plasma fire to the chest. The wound should have killed him instantly, but he kept moving. He grabbed one of our grenades and pulled the pin. Took 5 of my best soldiers with him when it exploded, the doctor wrote quickly. This matched reports from other veterans. Humans seemed to ignore normal survival instincts. That must have been difficult to see. Difficult? The commander's laugh had no humor in it. Doctor, that human had been lying there for 3 hours. 3 hours. Pretending to be dead. Waiting for us to get close enough. Dr. Milandra felt a chill run through her thin frame. He was conscious the entire time? Conscious and planning. Zek's thigh turned from the window. They used their own wounded as weapons. Their dead as shields. When we cornered a group of humans in a storage building, they rigged the whole place to explode. 20 humans inside chose to die rather than surrender. The doctor had treated trauma cases before. Soldiers often exaggerated enemy abilities to explain their defeats. But 17 different veterans had told similar stories about human tactics, and the coalition had won many battles against the humans, but somehow it felt like losing. How did the siege end? Zek's thigh sat down heavily. The chair groaned under the weight. My soldiers started breaking down. They couldn't sleep. Every shadow looked like a human. Every sound could be an attack. We had motion sensors, heat scanners, the best technology in the galaxy, but the humans found ways around all of it. What kind of ways? They covered themselves in mud to hide their heat signatures. They moved through the sewer systems. They attacked during shift changes. During meals. During prayer time. Always when we least expected it. The commander's voice dropped to a whisper. They studied us, Doctor. They learned our routines, our weaknesses, like they were hunting prey. Dr. Milandra stopped writing. Something about that word made her stomach twist. Hunting? On my homeworld, we have pack hunters called Skelmars. They follow wounded animals for days, wearing them down until the prey collapses from exhaustion. The Skelmars are patient. They're smart, but they're nothing compared to humans. The doctor looked at her notes. Every veteran had used similar words. Hunters, predators, patient. Commander, help me understand something. The coalition won the war. The humans agreed to a peace treaty. Why do you seem so concerned? Zextai was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the three suns were setting, casting long shadows across the medical center. When the commander spoke again, the words came out slowly, carefully. Doctor, I've been thinking about that for 6 months. We didn't beat the humans. They stopped fighting because they got what they wanted. What did they want? To learn how we fight, to study our technology, to understand our weaknesses. The commander stood up again, moving to the door. The peace treaty gave them access to our trade routes, our communication networks, our cultural exchanges. They're still watching us, Doctor, still learning. Dr. Milandra felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. You think they're planning something? I think they're the smartest hunters in the galaxy. And I think we just taught them everything they needed to know to hunt us properly. Commander Zextai paused at the door. The war isn't over, Doctor. It was just human education. And now school is finished. The door closed with a soft hiss, leaving Dr. Milandra alone with her notes and a growing sense of dread. She looked at the files on her desk. 17 veterans, all with similar stories, all with the same haunted look in their eyes. She reached for her communication device. There were more interviews to conduct, more stories to hear. But already, she was beginning to understand why the coalition's victory felt so much like defeat. The humans were still out there. And now they knew exactly how to beat the greatest military force in the galaxy. Dr. Milandra sat across from Commander Zextai again 2 days later. The Vorthak looked worse than before. The gray skin seemed paler, and the yellow eyes had dark circles around them. Sleep had not come easily. I want to hear about the siege itself, the doctor said. Help me understand what happened on Kepler 442b. The commander's metal fingers drummed against the chair arm. The depot was important. Food, medical supplies, weapon parts. Everything our forces in that sector needed to keep fighting. Intelligence said a small human force was approaching. 3,000 soldiers, maybe less. That seems like a manageable threat. That's what we thought. Zextai stared at the wall. I had 50,000 troops. The best shields. The best weapons. The depot had enough supplies to last for months. I thought we'd hold them off for a day or two. Then they'd retreat to find easier targets. Dr. Milandra made notes. Standard military thinking. Every species in the coalition followed similar logic. When did you first encounter the humans? Oh? Day 3. They didn't attack the depot directly. Instead, they hit our outer sensors. Just quick strikes. Then they disappeared. I sent patrols to find them. The commander's voice got quieter. Only half the patrols came back. What happened to the others? We found them eventually. Scattered across the landscape. But something was wrong with the bodies. The humans hadn't just killed them. They'd used them. Dr. Milandra looked up from her notes. Used them how? Traps. The humans had taken our dead soldiers and rigged them with explosives. When our recovery teams tried to collect the bodies, they triggered the bombs. We lost 30 more troops, just trying to honor our fallen. The doctor felt sick. Every coalition species had sacred rituals for their dead. The idea of using corpses as weapons was horrifying. This violated all rules of warfare. The humans don't seem to know about those rules. Zextai stood and walked to the window. Or, they don't care. After that, we stopped sending out patrols. We decided to wait for the humans to attack directly. Did they? Oh yes. But not the way we expected. The commander turned back to face her. That night, they attacked the main gate. 100 humans. Running straight at our defensive lines. Suicide charge, we thought. We cut them down easily. But it was a distraction. While we were busy with the frontal attack, other humans were climbing the walls on the far side of the depot. They got inside our perimeter and destroyed 2 supply warehouses before we could stop them. Dr. Milandra wrote faster. This showed tactical thinking, but nothing beyond normal military strategy. How many humans did you kill in that attack? All of them. Every single human in that assault died. We thought we'd won a great victory. Zextai laughed bitterly. We were fools. They'd traded 100 lives to destroy supplies worth 10 times that much, and they'd learned our response patterns. What do you mean? The next attack came the following night. Same pattern, but adjusted. They knew exactly where our weak points were, how fast our reinforcements moved, how we positioned our weapons. They'd been watching everything. The doctor felt a chill. They used the first attack to study you? Like scientists studying lab animals. The second attack killed 500 of my soldiers and destroyed our communications center. The third attack took out our shield generators. Each time, they lost people. Each time, they learned something new. Dr. Milandra tried to imagine this kind of thinking. Deliberately sacrificing soldiers just to gather information seemed impossible. How long did this continue? 3 weeks. 21 days of constant attacks. Not big ones. Small groups, hitting different targets. Sometimes just 5 or 6 humans. Sometimes 50. We never knew when or where they'd strike next. Active R. Couldn't you predict their patterns? That's what made it so horrible. There were no patterns. They attacked during day shifts, night shifts, during meals, during rest periods. My soldiers couldn't sleep, couldn't relax. Every shadow might hide an enemy. Every sound could mean death. Zextai sat down again. The metal arm making grinding sounds. I had veterans who'd fought in a dozen campaigns. Tough, experienced soldiers. After a week of this, they were jumping at their own shadows. After 2 weeks, some were crying. After 3 weeks, they were begging to retreat. What about reinforcements? I called for them on day 10. Command sent another 20,000 troops. The humans adjusted their tactics immediately. Bigger attacks, more coordinated. It was like they'd been waiting for us to get more soldiers. Dr. Milandra looked at her notes. The numbers didn't make sense. Commander, if you had 70,000 troops, and they had 3,000, why couldn't you defeat them? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Zexthai's hands shook slightly. Because they didn't fight to win, Doctor. They fought to hurt us. Every attack cost us more than it cost them. Not just in soldiers, but in morale, in sanity. Can you give me a specific example? Day 18. We'd finally tracked down one of their camps. 50 humans, hiding in a cave system. We surrounded them with 500 soldiers. No way out. We called for their surrender. Did they surrender? They laughed. The words came out like a growl. They actually laughed at us. Then they started singing. Some kind of human war song. We moved in to capture them, and the whole cave system exploded. They'd rigged it with enough explosives to kill themselves and 200 of my troops. Dr. Milandra stopped writing. They chose death over surrender? More than that. They chose death as a weapon. Those 50 humans knew they were going to die. They planned for it. They used their own lives as bait to kill as many of us as possible. The doctor tried to understand this mentality. Every species she knew would choose slavery over death, submission over destruction. The will to survive was the strongest force in nature. How did your soldiers react? Panic. Complete breakdown. We'd killed 50 humans and lost 200 troops doing it. The math was simple. At that rate, they could wipe out our entire force just by dying. Zexthai's voice cracked. My soldiers started refusing orders. Some tried to desert. Others just sat in their bunkers. too scared to move. What did you do? What could I do? On day 21, I ordered the withdrawal. We abandoned the depot, the supplies, everything. My soldiers were so grateful to leave that some of them cried with relief. Dr. Milandra reviewed her notes. A force of 70,000 coalition troops, defeated by 3,000 humans, who all died in the process. It defied every military principle she knew. Commander, one last question. Do you think the humans knew they couldn't win? Zexthai was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Doctor, I don't think they cared about winning. I think they cared about teaching us to fear them. And in that, they succeeded completely. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the medical equipment. Outside, the three suns continued their eternal dance across alien skies. But inside, Dr. Milandra began to understand that the coalition might have encountered something far more dangerous than an enemy they could defeat. They had met an enemy that didn't mind losing, as long as the victory cost more than anyone was willing to pay. The next session came a week later. Commander Zexthai looked even worse. The medical staff had been giving sedatives to help with sleep, but they didn't seem to work. The Vorthak's hands shook constantly now, and the yellow eyes moved around the room like they expected attacks from the shadows. Dr. Milandra had spent the week reading reports from other veterans. Every story was similar. Humans doing impossible things. Humans ignoring basic survival instincts. But today she wanted to hear about something different. Tell me about the naval battle at Proxima Station, she said. Zexthai's whole body went rigid. The metal arm stopped moving completely. Who told you I was there? Your service record. You served as tactical analyst aboard the Eternal Harmony. The doctor kept her voice gentle. It was supposed to be the final battle of the war. It should have been. The commander stared at the floor. Admiral Tharksak brought 200 ships. The best of our fleet. The humans had maybe 40 vessels. Old ones. Mostly. Some of them were just cargo ships, with weapons bolted on. That sounds like overwhelming odds in your favor. That's what we thought. The admiral was confident. He said we'd end the war in one day, show the humans the power of the coalition fleet, and they'd surrender. Zexthai's laugh was bitter. We learned that day that humans don't understand the word surrender. Dr. Milandra made notes. What happened when the battle started? At first, everything went perfectly. Our ships had better armor, better shields, better weapons. We destroyed 10 human vessels in the first hour without losing a single ship of our own. The commander's voice got quieter, but something was wrong. The humans weren't retreating, they were getting closer. Closer? They should have stayed at long range, where their lighter weapons might have had a chance. Instead, they flew straight at us. Through our weapons fire, through our missile strikes. Like they wanted to fight up close. 2. The doctor looked up from her notes. That doesn't sound tactically smart. It wasn't. It was terrifying. Zexthai stood up and paced to the window. The first sign something was wrong came when one of their ships rammed the destroyer Silent Wind. Just flew straight into it. Both ships exploded. An accident? That's what we thought. Until it happened again. And again. The humans were using their ships as weapons. Sacrificing whole crews just to take out one of our vessels. 7. Doctor. Milandra felt that familiar chill. The crews died willingly? Willingly? They were celebrating. We intercepted their communications. As they flew into certain death, they were laughing and singing. The commander turned from the window, eyes wide. What kind of beings celebrate their own destruction? What did your admiral do? He ordered the fleet to spread out, make ramming harder. But the humans adapted. They started working in groups. Some ships would attack our shields to weaken them. Others would ram the damaged areas. They turned every engagement into a suicide mission. Zexthai sat down again, breathing heavily. But the worst part wasn't the ramming attacks. It was watching them change their tactics during the battle. Change how? I was monitoring their communications and ship movements. At the start of the battle, their weapons barely scratched our armor. By the middle of the fight, they were cutting through our shields like they were made of paper. Dr. Milandra stopped writing. That's impossible. You can't upgrade weapons in the middle of a battle. The humans did it anyway. I watched their engineers working outside their ships, in vacuum, with no safety equipment, rewiring power systems, installing new components. Some of them died from radiation exposure or equipment failures, but the ones who survived kept working. They modified their ships during combat? More than that. They were sharing information across their entire fleet. When one ship found a weakness in our defenses, they transmitted the data to everyone. Within minutes, all the human vessels had adapted their weapons to exploit that weakness. The commander's metal fingers started clicking again. I've studied military history for 40 years, Doctor. I've never seen anything like it. Most species need weeks or months to adapt new technologies. The humans did it in minutes. How is that possible? Their crews were taking insane risks. Working on live weapons systems. Bypassing safety protocols. Ignoring radiation warnings. A dozen human engineers died just to install one upgrade, but they kept working until it was finished. Dr. Milandra tried to imagine this level of dedication. What was the turning point in the battle? Work error. Zexthai was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. The vengeful strike. One of our heaviest battleships. The humans had damaged its engines, but it was still fighting. Still dangerous. What did they do? A human ship called the Earth's Fury had lost most of its weapons and half its crew. By any reasonable standard, it should have retreated or surrendered. Instead, it used its gravity manipulation system to drag itself toward the vengeful strike. For a ramming attack? No. For something much worse. The commander's hands shook violently. The captain of the Earth's Fury sent a message to our admiral. Just 3 words: see you soon. Then he aimed his ship at the nearest star and activated the gravity drive at maximum power. More. Dr. Milandra looked up from her notes. He flew into the star? He dragged our battleship with him. The gravity field was too strong for the vengeful strike to escape. Both ships fell into the star together. 3,000 coalition sailors died with maybe 200 humans. The human captain killed his own crew to destroy one enemy ship? The crew knew what was happening. We intercepted their final transmissions. They were volunteering for the mission, fighting over who got to stay aboard for the suicide run. Zexthai's voice cracked. They were arguing about who got the honor of dying. The room fell silent. Dr. Milandra tried to process this information. A species that viewed death as an honor. Sacrifice as a privilege. It went against everything she understood about life and survival. How did the battle end? Admiral Tharkseek ordered a retreat after we lost 60 ships. The humans had maybe 10 vessels left, all damaged. By any military standard, we should have won easily. But the crews were terrified. They'd watched humans turn their own deaths into weapons, adapt technology in real time, sacrifice themselves with joy. So the coalition withdrew? We ran away, Doctor, from an enemy that was almost completely destroyed, because we realized that even when we won, we lost more than we could afford. Zexthai looked out the window at the setting suns. That night, Admiral Tharkseek contacted the human fleet and proposed a ceasefire. Not because we couldn't beat them, but because we couldn't afford to. Dr. Milandra reviewed her notes. The pattern was becoming clear. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to make victory too expensive for their enemies to achieve. Commander, one more question. Do you think the humans expected to lose at Proxima Station? I think they planned for it. The words came out slowly, carefully. Every tactic they used was designed to maximize our losses, not minimize their own. They studied us during the battle, learned our weaknesses, and transmitted that information back to Earth. You think they were gathering intelligence? I think they were investing in the future, trading ships and lives for knowledge about how we fight, how we think, how we break. Zexthai stood up to leave. The peace treaty gave them everything they learned about our military capabilities. Now they know exactly how to beat us. As the commander left, Dr. Milandra stared at her growing pile of notes. Each interview revealed new horrors, new impossible human behaviors. But a pattern was emerging. The humans hadn't been fighting to win the war. They'd been fighting to win the next one. Dr. Milandra almost canceled the session. Commander Zextai had been found in his quarters that morning, staring at the wall and mumbling words in an ancient Vorthok dialect. The medical staff had sedated him twice, but he kept waking up screaming about children. Now he sat across from her, strapped into the chair with soft restraints. His yellow eyes moved constantly, seeing things that weren't there. The gray skin had turned almost white, and both the organic and metal hands shook without stopping. "Commander, we don't have to continue these sessions," Dr. Milandra said gently. "Your health is more important than my research." "No." The word came out harsh, desperate. "You need to know. You need to understand what they're capable of." Zexthai's voice dropped to a whisper. "You need to know about Luna Base." The doctor had read about Luna Base in the classified files, a coalition special forces operation that had gone wrong somehow. Details were limited, marked as too sensitive for standard military records. "Tell me what happened." It was supposed to be simple. Intelligence said humans had a research facility on Earth's moon. Small operation, maybe 50 scientists. My unit was ordered to capture it intact. Get prisoners for questioning. Secure any useful technology. How many troops did you command? 500. Elite special forces. The best soldiers in the coalition. We'd done this kind of mission dozens of times against other species. Quick insertion. Overwhelm the defenders. Secure the facility. Zexthai's breathing became rapid and shallow. It should have been routine. What made it different? The humans weren't just scientists. They had families there. Mates, offspring, elderly relatives. About 200 civilians total. The commander's voice cracked. In coalition culture, family members are protected. Non-combatants. We use them for negotiations, not warfare. Dr. Milandra nodded. This was standard practice throughout the galaxy. Civilian populations were valuable precisely because they were vulnerable. Did you attempt negotiations? Of course. I contacted their facility commander, a scientist named Dr. Sarah Chen. I explained that we wanted to talk, not fight. I offered safe passage for all non-combatants if they surrendered the facility peacefully. How did she respond? She laughed. The word came out like a sob. She actually laughed at me. Then she said something that still haunts my dreams. "You don't understand humans at all. Do you?" Dr. Milandra made notes, but she could see that Zexthai was starting to break down. The restraints were probably necessary. What happened next? I gave her time to consider. Standard protocol when civilians are involved. We waited outside the facility for 6 hours, expecting them to see reason. Instead, we detected massive movement inside. They were preparing for war. See, the scientists were arming themselves? Not just the scientists, everyone. We monitored their communications. Dr. Chen was giving weapons to elderly humans who could barely walk. She was teaching children how to use explosives. Zexthai's whole body was shaking now. Children, doctor. Young ones. Maybe 10 or 12 cycles old. The doctor felt sick. That's against every rule of civilized warfare. I tried to tell myself it was a bluff. Desperate people making threats they wouldn't follow through on. So I ordered my troops to move closer, show them we were serious. Maybe the sight of armed soldiers would make them surrender. Did it work? The children started shooting at us. The words came out in a rush. Not the adults, the children. Young humans, barely old enough to hold weapons, firing at trained special forces. And when we shot back, when we had to shoot back to defend ourselves, Zexthai stopped talking. His breathing became so rapid that Dr. Milandra thought he might pass out. She reached for the sedative controls, but he shook his head violently. "No, you have to hear this. You have to know." He took a deep, shuddering breath. The young ones didn't cry when they were wounded. They didn't call for help or beg for mercy. They kept fighting until they died. And their parents were proud of them. The human adults encouraged this behavior? Encouraged? They demanded it. We intercepted communications between the families. Parents telling their offspring that dying in battle was better than living in captivity. Elderly humans volunteering for suicide missions to save ammunition for the younger fighters. Dr. Milandra couldn't write anymore. Her hands were shaking too badly. How long did the siege last? 2 days. 48 hours of the most horrific combat I've ever experienced. These weren't trained soldiers. They were teachers, engineers, maintenance workers, younglings barely old enough to walk. But they fought like demons. What ended it? Zek's thigh was quiet for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice was so soft she could barely hear him. Dr. Chen contacted me on the second day. She said she had a proposal. What kind of proposal? She'd connected the facility's life support system to the main reactor. If we didn't withdraw immediately, she would overload it. The explosion would kill everyone in the facility instantly. Dr. Milandra looked up from her notes. She was threatening to kill her own people? Not threatening, promising. She showed me the detonator, a simple device that would flood the facility with radiation, killing everyone inside within minutes. 200 human civilians, including dozens of children. What did you do? I called her bluff. Told her that no rational being would murder their own young just to deny us a few prisoners. I gave her 1 hour to surrender, or we would storm the facility. And she set off the device immediately. Didn't even wait for the deadline. Just looked at me through the communication screen, smiled, and pressed the button. Zek's thigh was sobbing now, tears streaming down his gray face. 200 humans dead. All of them. Children, elderly, everyone. She killed them all, rather than let us capture them. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Zek's thighs crying. Doctor, Milandra tried to process what she'd heard. A species that would kill their own young, rather than accept defeat. It went against every natural instinct she could imagine. Commander, how did your soldiers react? Complete breakdown. Half of them refused to fight humans ever again. The other half requested transfers to different sectors. I had veteran Special Forces troops crying like newborns, asking to go home to their families. And you? I submitted my resignation the next day. 40 years of military service, and I couldn't handle one more day of fighting humans. My superiors denied the resignation, said I was too valuable to lose, so I kept serving. But something inside me was broken. Dr. Milandra reached for the sedative controls. Zek's thigh needed rest, needed time to heal from these memories. But he grabbed her arm with his metal hand. Doctor, you have to understand. This wasn't just one facility. We got reports from dozens of similar operations. Every time coalition forces encountered human civilians, the same thing happened. They chose death over capture. Every time. Why are you telling me this? Because they're still out there. On Earth. On their colonies. Probably spreading to new worlds. And they're teaching their young ones the same lessons. The same willingness to die rather than submit. His grip tightened on her arm. The peace treaty didn't end the war, Doctor. It just gave them time to raise more children who think death is preferable to defeat. As the sedatives finally took effect, and Zek's thigh slumped in his chair, Dr. Milandra stared at her notes. She was beginning to understand why the coalition had agreed to a peace treaty so quickly. They hadn't been fighting an army. They'd been fighting an entire species that viewed death as victory, and taught their children that some things were worth dying for. The truly terrifying part wasn't that humans were willing to die. It was that they were raising their young ones to think the same way. Dr. Milandra sat alone in her office, surrounded by stacks of interview files. 3 weeks had passed since her last session with Commander Zek's thigh. The Vorthak was now in the secure psychiatric ward, heavily sedated and under constant supervision. He spent most days drawing pictures of human children with weapons, muttering warnings that no one wanted to hear. But he wasn't the only one. 17 veterans from different species, different military branches, different theaters of the war. all telling similar stories, all broken by their encounters with humans. The doctor activated her computer terminal and pulled up the classified archives. She had special permission now, after submitting her preliminary report to Coalition Command. What she found in those files made her stomach turn. Operation Silent Thunder. 50,000 Coalition troops deployed to capture a human industrial complex. The humans destroyed the entire facility rather than surrender it, killing 3,000 of their own workers in the process. Operation Starfall. A naval blockade around human shipping routes. The human cargo vessels rammed Coalition ships instead of surrendering their cargo. Entire families died rather than submit to inspection. Operation Golden Dawn. An attempt to capture human political leaders for peace negotiations. The leaders killed themselves with poison before Coalition forces could reach them. Every major engagement followed the same pattern. Humans choosing destruction over defeat, death over submission. And each time, Coalition forces suffered massive psychological casualties. Dr. Milandra opened another file. Human Cultural Analysis, compiled by Coalition xenobiologists. What she read made her blood run cold. Humans had a word: martyrdom. The concept of dying for a cause being more valuable than living without it. Their history was full of examples. Groups of humans choosing death rather than abandoning their beliefs. Soldiers fighting to the last person rather than retreating. Entire populations burning their own cities rather than surrendering them to enemies. But it went deeper than that. Human children were raised on stories of heroes who died gloriously in battle. Their entertainment celebrated sacrifice, honor through death, victory through destruction. What other species saw as mental illness, humans saw as the highest form of courage. The door chimed. Dr. Milandra looked up to see Director Valnash entering her office. The elderly Keelian moved slowly on shaking legs, age spots covering his pale skin. As head of Coalition Psychiatric Services, he rarely visited individual doctors personally. Director, I wasn't expecting you. Your reports have reached the highest levels of command, Doctor. They're very concerned. Valnash sat down carefully, his large eyes filled with worry. Tell me your conclusions about the human psychological profile. Dr. Milandra pulled up her analysis on the screen. Director, I believe we fundamentally misunderstood what humans are. We assumed they were just another intelligent species, driven by the same survival instincts as ourselves. And they're not? They're predators, sir. Not just physically, but psychologically. They evolved as hunters on a world where everything was trying to kill them. For millions of years, the only humans who survived were the ones willing to keep fighting when any rational being would give up. The director nodded slowly. Go on. Their entire culture is built around the concept of persistence hunting, following prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They've applied that same mentality to warfare. They don't fight to win individual battles. They fight to break their enemy's will to continue fighting. The peace treaty was never about ending the war. It was about giving humans access to our technology, our military protocols, our psychological profiles. They've been studying us, Director, learning our weaknesses. Dr. Milandra stood up and moved to the window. Outside, Coalition citizens went about their daily lives, unaware of the discussion taking place above them. I've reviewed every major human military victory in their own history. They follow the same pattern. Accept massive losses to inflict psychological damage on their enemies. Make victory so expensive that surrender becomes preferable. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying they're still hunting us. The peace treaty isn't the end of the conflict. It's just the humans catching their breath before the next phase. Director Valnash was quiet for a long moment. Do you have evidence for these claims? Dr. Milandra returned to her desk and pulled up another file. Human population statistics from before and after the war. They're having more offspring now than they did during peacetime. Educational programs on their worlds have shifted to focus on military sciences and coalition languages. They're preparing for war. They're preparing for a different kind of war. One where they know exactly how we think, how we fight, how we break. And they're raising an entire generation to understand that knowledge. The director stood up slowly. What do you recommend? Honestly, I don't think there's anything we can do. We can't match their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Our species value life too much to compete with beings who see death as just another tool. Are you suggesting we surrender? I'm suggesting we accept reality. Humans aren't like us. They're not like any species in the galaxy. They're patient, adaptive, and absolutely ruthless when threatened. The peace treaty gives us time, but it won't last forever. Dr. Milandra activated her communication system. Computer, play audio file Zexthai final interview. Commander Zexthai's voice filled the room, recorded during his last coherent moment before complete mental breakdown. They're coming back, Doctor. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're coming, and when they do, they'll know everything about us, while we still know almost nothing about them. The war was just their education. Now school is finished, and exam time is coming. The recording ended. Director Val Nash stared at the speaker for several minutes before speaking. How long do you think we have? Unknown. Maybe decades. Maybe centuries. But Director, I don't think it matters. Humans think in geological timescales when it comes to revenge. They'll wait until they're completely ready, then strike when we least expect it. What should we tell Coalition Command? Dr. Milandra looked out the window again. 3 suns setting over a peaceful alien city. Unaware that somewhere across the galaxy, patient hunters were preparing for the next phase of their hunt. Tell them the truth. We didn't defeat the humans. We just taught them how to defeat us. And now, they're teaching their children everything they learned. Director Val Nash left without another word. Dr. Milandra remained at the window as darkness fell, thinking about Commander Zexthai's warning. Somewhere out there, on a small blue world orbiting a yellow star, humans were raising their young ones, teaching them about coalition technology, coalition psychology, coalition weaknesses, teaching them to be patient. The next war wouldn't be fought with fleets and armies. It would be fought by humans who had spent their entire lives studying their enemies, learning their fears, understanding their breaking points. Humans who had been raised from birth to see death not as failure, but as just another weapon in their arsenal. Dr. Milandra closed her files and prepared to go home, but she knew sleep would not come easily. Not when she understood the truth that her interviews had revealed. The Coalition had encountered the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, and they had given it everything it needed to hunt them properly. The war wasn't over. The humans were just getting started.